Should be us.
Okay, welcome folks to another episode of the Bishy PE Podcast. I can't believe the next couple of sentences are going to come out of my mouth right now, but I never thought I'd be sitting here and introducing the one and only Judy Murray. Judy, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You are welcome. Thanks for stalking me and hounding me into doing it. No, always got time for young people, especially if they're interested in sports. So nice to be with you.
Magnificent. That's what perseverance gets you. That's what it is. Okay, we're also joined by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson looking very festive like myself.
Thank you very much.
And we're also joined by our sports captain, Katie Stansbury, who's had a busy week with the reindeer run, haven't you?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Without further ado, we'll go into the questions, Judy, and I'm going to start us off. Like to find out about your school career and what that was like growing up for you.
Oh, goodness. I need to have a long memory. It was a long time ago. I went to Dunblane Primary School until I was in primary 5, and my parents decided to send me up to Morrison's Academy. At the time, there wasn't a senior school in Dunblane, so kids from Dunblane went to McLaren High School in Callander. But my parents decided to kind of bite the bullet a bit and send me up to Morrison's because I was so interested in sport. And I'm very glad that they did, because it was a girls' school and it allowed me to play pretty much every sport under the sun. I left school after 5th year. I had all of my hires. I had a place at Edinburgh University. And so I took a year out to play tennis, and then I went to uni and did French and business studies.
What would your teacher's perception of you be?
Yeah, lively probably. It was a little bit disruptive, I think, through my teenage years. Didn't really like sitting still that much. So I was at my happiest when it was PE or when it was after school, and there was always activities after school or school matches, whether that was netball, hockey, badminton, swimming. I did lots of school teams, and I really loved that about school, that there was so many opportunities to try so many different things. I would say if a subject didn't engage me, I could be quite noisy and probably quite distracting to some of the other kids. I think the year that I left Morrison, it became a mixed school, a co-ed school. There was a boys' school and a girls' school next door to each other, and the year after I left, it became mixed. So I was always glad actually to have gone to a girls' school. I think certainly the opportunities for me to, I don't know, there's something about you never feel like you're in the minority. Which I think, as a female who's grown up in sport, always have, certainly maybe things are a little different now, but I'd always felt like you're vying for position or you're vying to be heard. So I enjoyed the whole thing about being at a girls' school. Went in a bus to school took us about 40 minutes to get there in the bus in the morning, because it stopped everywhere to pick people up. So it was an early start every morning. But again, I think all of these things are their routine, their discipline. You make great friends on the bus. So I can look back fondly on my school days for sure. And like everybody, you remember your favourite teachers, or the ones that went the extra mile for you, or who made their subject really interesting. And funnily enough, my favourite teacher at school was a Latin teacher. I mean, not many people would say that, but I actually loved Latin. I mean, what is that all about?
You want to give us a bit of Latin, Judy?
Amas, amat, amamus, amakis, amant.
Say fair. Katie, I think you'll get the next question, pal.
Yeah. When you were younger, did you have any part-time jobs, and did any skills you learned off of that?
I did actually, Katie. I had the first job probably that I did was paper round. And I hated a Sunday paper round because the Sunday papers are much heavier because they got all the magazines and everything in them. But I used to do a paper round on the weekends. So, and then I also had a Saturday job in a greengrocer. Well, not a greengrocer, a grocer. a proper old-fashioned grocer. So I learned how to slice the bacon, how to cut the cheese. I made up the orders. I stocked the shelves, and so forth. That was all when I was kind of early teens. And really after that, because I got into my sport a lot. I played tennis in the summer, I played badminton in the winter, and most weekends I was away playing in something, matches or competitions and so forth. But I think the things that I learned from the jobs at school is you learn about how to deal with the public. You learn how to serve people. You learn how to be part of a team. You learn about discipline of getting up and doing what you have to do within the time that's allowed to do it. You learn a lot from being around other people, usually older people. That's a big advantage, I think, for me. Anything where you can learn sort of on-the-job training, I call it, within coaching. The easiest way to get, or quickest way to get good at something is to work alongside people who know what they're doing. Yeah. So I think when you're a young thing and you go into that environment, you need to find the people who will spend time with you and help you to be able to do whatever you're able to do efficiently. But there's no substitute for getting work experience when you're young.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Johnson.
For me, okay, Judy, so my next question is just about how it all started. So what was your route or your journey into tennis? How did that come about?
I started playing tennis when I was 10. I'm very old, so when I learned to play tennis, you had wooden rackets, and the tennis courts were well, they're the same size as they are just now, but when you're 10, they feel like they're huge. And tennis balls were quite hard in those days. Nowadays, kids can learn much younger, with mini rackets and sponge balls or low pressure balls and badminton sized courts, so you can be eased into it better. But yeah, I started at the local club in Dunblane with my parents. My parents both played obviously at the club, but they also played at county level, so they were decent players. So they taught me how to play. This was an era when there was no such thing as a tennis coach. You learned from the older members of the club, and they taught me how to play the game. So they were never really teaching me how to hit the ball. They taught me how to play the game, which of course is the fun of any sport. So I played with the other kids at the club. I played in the club teams. I got good enough to play in the ladies team when I was about 11 or 12, and that was great actually, because my mum and my mum's best friend both played in it. The toughest thing I think about that, of playing in an adults team when you're very young, is actually socializing with them, at the match teas and things like that, because they talk about things that are just like, you think they're so boring and you're not part of it because you don't really feel like you can join in. That was really the toughest part of it, but the playing of the matches was great, because again, you're learning from people who are more experienced than you are. So that was how I got into tennis. I played for Scotland for a number of years at tennis, although you can only play in kind of friendly fixtures for Scotland because tennis is a GB sport. So we'd have Scotland England or Scotland Wales Ireland matches, but they were kind of unofficial matches, if you know what I mean. I played for Great Britain in the World Student Games when I was at uni. That was one of the biggest things that I played in. Went to Romania for that in way back 1981. Had a great time, massive experience being part of. It's the biggest world sporting event behind the Olympics. It's absolutely huge. Won a lot of Scottish titles. It wasn't so difficult to win Scottish titles, to be honest, because tennis was very much a minority sport and very few women or girls played competitively. Actually, back then, more women played competitively then than actually play competitively now, which is very sad for me to see that. But yeah, so it wasn't so difficult to become the best in Scotland because there wasn't that many people to play against. But I played badminton in the winter because we had no indoor courts and our weather is crap, as you know. And I played for Scotland at badminton as well. So those are my two favourite sports, the racket sports. And how I got into coaching was really just after Andy was born. Jamie is 15 months older than Andy. We moved from Glasgow back to Dunblane to be a bit closer to my parents so that I had some help with the kids. And I went over and rejoined the tennis club and still discovered that there was still no coaching for any of the youngsters there, and so I started to volunteer just for a couple of hours a week. And I wasn't a coach, I was a sales rep when my kids were small. I had to give up my job when I had Andy. And I really enjoyed teaching the game or sharing the game with the kids at the club, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I set up a really great program within our community club. I roped in all the other mums to help running cafes and competitions and teams, and with school teams, club teams, because the fun of sport is competing, as I said before. So we had a fantastic community club. It was just a regular little club, 4 artificial grass courts, nice little clubhouse with a couple of squash courts in it, but just great people around, and a wonderful place for youngsters to grow up, because there was obviously squash and tennis, but there was a park beside the tennis club, so they could play football in the days before the no ball game signs went up. They could play cricket over there. They had water bomb fights. We had, if the weather was bad, we had loads and loads of board games and things in the clubhouse. So that was my introduction to coaching, and I went from being a volunteer coach at the club to working in the wider district, which you would maybe call a county. In tennis we call them districts for some reason, and then upgraded my coaching qualifications. I did my first coaching qualification just before I went to uni, and I only did it as a means of making some pocket money on the weekends, and never actually used it. I passed the qualification, but never actually used it. Always found better things to do on the weekends. So when I was working at the club and then in the wider district, I upgraded my qualification again, and then I upgraded it to the top qualification, and I was the first woman to pass the LTA's Performance Award, which was their top award at that time. And as a result of passing that, I managed to get the Scottish national coach job, which sounds like a big deal, but actually tennis was such a minority sport in Scotland. There was no infrastructure, so really I was starting with pretty much a blank canvas and tiny salary, rubbish budget, but loads and loads of enthusiasm. And
Did you like
that was when I really got stuck in to learn, to creating opportunities for the Scottish kids that other countries gave to their kids. So I created infrastructure, developed a whole load of players, I developed a lot of coaches as well. And after 10 years, I quit, a bit in frustration, because we had all these great kids coming through, and I had tiny budget. I had, I didn't have staff. It was really too much. And anyway, Sport Scotland wouldn't give me any more funding. Kids had to train outside of the country, but they really were good enough, I thought, a lot of them, to become world class, and we couldn't cope with them in Scotland. So I resigned after 10 years and decided I was just going to kind of do the best that I could to help Jamie and Andy, in their careers. They were sort of 17 and 18 at the time, and it worked out okay. It was a big risk, but it worked out okay.
It worked out okay. See what you were saying about having a blank canvas. Did you like that then, that you could go in and basically put your own stamp on it and do things the way that you felt it should be done?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much there, and if you think about it, a Scottish national coach for tennis job is not going to attract a great world-class tennis coach from another country, because at the time we didn't have any indoor courts. We had no infrastructure, we had no world-class players, we had no world-class coaches. You would be completely starting from scratch. So it wasn't an attractive proposition to anybody else, but it was to me, because I understood the landscape. And not long after I started, the first indoor courts opened at Stirling University. There were 4 in there. There's 6 in there now, but that was 4 or 5 miles from where we lived, which was great. Otherwise I'd have been driving through to Glasgow or Edinburgh or somewhere else, on a pretty much daily basis to work. So I think it didn't, the job was a bit scary in itself, because there's a big responsibility when you're a national coach, but I think for me, I just try to apply common sense to everything that I do, and I realized I start with the youngest kids, because they're the ones you can influence the most. So I started with 20 children who I thought had the most potential across Scotland, aged between 7 and 11. So Andy would have been one of the youngest, and Elena Baltasha would have been the oldest. She was 11. And of those 20 kids, 4 went on to play Davis Cup, for Great Britain, and Baltasha went on to play Fed Cup. She was the British #1 for many years, and Jamie and Andy obviously won their Grand Slams, became world #1s. Jamie Baker made 150 in the world, and Colin Fleming made top 20 in the world in doubles. So, and we also produced Leon Smith, who's the Davis Cup captain and head of men's tennis at the LTA now. He started with me when he was 20, and really I gave him an apprenticeship. I couldn't pay him, but I could give him a learning opportunity, and he grabbed it with both hands, and he's one of the most successful coaches in Great Britain now. So we did okay. So I always say to people, I'm not telling you this for any other reason, that, you know, it's not about what you have, it's what you do with what you have. And it's about surrounding yourself with the right people. Because if you have an army around you that support you and you're all in it together, you have no idea what you can achieve.
Absolutely.
That sounded really positive, but see, along those lines, did you have any kind of setbacks or challenges that made your job a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, I had. I mean, there were loads of challenges, of course, because I was on my own. You know, at that time, Tennis Scotland, which is the governing body, which now has about 20 staff. There were 4 people. There was me as the national coach. There was a head of development, and there were 2 secretaries. So one would have been the main secretary, which now you'd probably call a CEO, but she was a secretary, and then there was an assistant secretary, and that was it. You know, for the whole of Scotland, and there was a little one-room office in Edinburgh, and so really you were having to do an awful lot. You're pretty much having to do everything yourself. I was responsible for everything that came under national coach, which included coach education, national coaching conference, talent identification, competitions. Now there are heads of all of these things, but I had to do everything. So it was a real challenge. I had to work incredibly hard to juggle and manage everything, as well as develop a team for the future, because, you know, you're very aware that on your own you can do so much. But that was why I brought in an army again, and my army actually initially was the parents, you know, and I said, here's what I want to do, and here's how you're going to have to help me, because I can't do it myself. When I started, you know, I didn't have any staff, and I did just the same as I did at the club. And you know, we started a little cottage industry. So start small, dream big, take small steps, but keep moving forward and take people with you. But yeah, there's always obstacles. There's a challenge being in Scotland for a start, one with limited facilities, limited budget, rubbish weather, and also being so far away from everything else. So as soon as the kids that we were working with, it was very easy for them to outgrow the competition in Scotland, simply because there weren't a lot of great kids around, and you get fed up playing the same people. So having to go down to England for competitions, for GB training sessions, and then having to go overseas to get Tennis Europe points or European ranking points or World Junior ranking points incurs a lot of travel, a lot of time, and a lot of money. And the financial side of things was always a massive obstacle, trying to find the money, trying to get people to invest in tennis when it's not a sport that we do. You know, if I'd been rugby or football or golf and I had world-class kids, people would be throwing money at me probably, but it was quite hard. And I think I found it probably increasingly difficult to convince people in what I was doing because I was female. I'm absolutely certain that I wasn't taken as seriously as I would have been had I been a man in the same position.
Brilliant. Katie, over to you.
Yeah. What would you say is your greatest achievement in life?
I think probably what I achieved. What I achieved when I was the national coach, you know, starting from a blank canvas to, you know, junior Grand Slam champions, some world-class coaches, a pool of really great players. I think what saddens me enormously now, Katie, is that we don't have that anymore. You know, somebody should have built on that when I left, and we don't have that now, and that really disappoints me. We should have been riding the crest of a wave, especially when Andy and Jamie started winning their Grand Slams, and they're, you know, contending for all of the major events for the last sort of 15 years, and we haven't built on that. We don't have any major events. we don't have any major events up here. We still have very limited facilities. And it really disappoints me that we haven't capitalised on the profile and success and excitement we have in terms of tennis fans. There are a lot more tennis fans in Scotland now, but that's the thing that disappoints me the most. But I think it probably was my greatest achievement because you started from nothing and nobody believed we could do anything. Nobody except me.
The next set of questions, Judy, are in relation to you, obviously, as a mother. The reason why I'm asking that, I recently watched some of your documentary on the driving force, which is on Sky Sports or Sky. And one of the things you spoke about was the media sort of portrayed you as a pushy, intense mother. But in fact, it was more to do with your passion and your enthusiasm and just your determination to do well.
Yeah, I think I had a rough time with the media, as did Andy when he started out.
Yeah.
But I found myself picked out in a way that probably most sporting parents would not be picked out. And a lot of that had to do with the nature of tennis and Wimbledon in particular, which was really in 2005 Wimbledon, where Andy kind of came into the public eye because he made the third round and was playing on the middle Saturday on the centre court as a just turned 18-year-old. And the nature of tennis, and particularly at Wimbledon, is that there's no ad breaks at Wimbledon because it's on the BBC, and you have 20 seconds between points and 90 seconds at an end change or a set change. And in those dead times, the cameras and the commentators are always looking for somewhere to go. So of course they go in the player box or the royal box and they talk about the people that are in there. And because we were brand new, of course, they start to talk about us, the family, the team, the coaches, and so forth. And I think that that was where I first kind of got picked out as the anomaly that was a competitive mother of sons. And I do think if I'd been a competitive dad of sons, I don't think anybody would have really picked it up in the same way. So it was almost like being made to feel that there was something wrong with being competitive or being ambitious or showing too much enthusiasm, whereas you go along to a football match or a rugby match, people are pumping their fists and baring their teeth and shouting and whatever all the time, but it's kind of almost like, oh, it's not really the done thing, what's she doing? She's pushy, she's overbearing, she's aggressive, so I think the media painted this picture of me, and I think the written press, I read a lot of things that were written about me by people I'd never met, and I thought, wow, you're just making an assumption based on the fact that I get excited watching my kids playing tennis. So I kind of had to put up with that for a long time, and because I'd given up my job, I was no longer the national coach, so I sort of became just known as Andy and Jamie's mum, which is, it's kind of sloppy thing to think that, well, she's just the mum. Actually, what I'd had to learn how to coach, I'd had to learn how to negotiate my way through the pathway through tennis. I'd learned how to fundraise and video analyze. I'd learned to do massage, and now I was having to learn about the life and business of managing a professional athlete or two professional athletes. And that's a completely different thing because, the boys were young and they have to concentrate on what they have to do for their sport. But somebody's got to take care of the logistics and the paying the bills and servicing the sponsors and all the rest of it. So there were a lot of things that I then had to, tax returns. You have to do tax returns in all sorts of different countries because you're playing all over the world. There was just there was a lot to learn, and I think that when I continued to be criticised for always being around and why don't you let him go? He's old enough to look after himself. I was thinking, most players have a parent around actually, but you seem to just be picking on me, as the mother of a young British player. So yeah, it's but I think it turned. I think it turned a lot when Andy won. Actually, when Andy won Wimbledon, maybe yeah. I think they kind of forgave me for everything that they thought I was awful for when he won Wimbledon, because it was just like, wow, after 70, almost 80 years, I think, since a British man had won Wimbledon, and then suddenly they forgave him for being a surly Scot with a boring voice and doesn't cut his hair enough or doesn't shave or whatever they want to criticize him for, and Yeah, and I think also when I became the Fed Cup captain, which is the British women's team, I got the chance to do that at the end of 2011, and that was a massive thing for me because it was somebody recognising that I was a good coach and I wasn't just the mum. And, that gave me an awful lot of confidence. It gave me a lot of confidence to start speaking out about things because I had to, because I was the team captain, I had to speak out on behalf of women's sports. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's had lots of obstacles, but I think you just have to keep your blinkers on. And I think when people criticize you, you have to remember that you're not asking them for their advice because you don't value their advice. The people whose advice or opinion you value are your friends and your family, maybe your teachers. They're the people who mean something to you, who actually know you. You just have to keep remembering that. Thought I'd throw that one in there, John, just for you.
Kate, I think you'll get the next question.
Yeah, how do you feel when you're watching either Andy or Jamie? Like, do you feel calm and composed, or do you feel tense and uptight?
Don't be ridiculous, Katie. Calm and composed. I'm quite good at sitting, looking at it like I'm calm and composed now, but actually, it's torture, really. I think it got worse the better they got. The higher they went up the rankings, the more expectation there was on them from the media, from the public, and from themselves. And I felt that a lot. My common sense was telling me there's nothing you can do about it. Once they go out there, you can't do anything other than be supportive in the crowd. But like any parent, you just want things to go right for your kids. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It's just a natural reaction. It's just that my kids do things in front of millions of people, and there's big stakes for them whenever they're playing. So yeah, I find it, and I can be out there for hours. A best of 5 set match can last 5 hours, and you can be out there, you're too nervous to eat or drink anything, and you're just, your stomach's in knots. It's kind of a mixture of a heart attack and severe nausea all rolled into one. So it isn't any fun.
Brilliant.
In terms of Andy's recent injuries and his setback, has that been difficult for you to watch?
It's been more difficult for him. Yeah, it's definitely been difficult to watch. He's got incredible resilience and patience and determination to kind of go through and do everything that he has to do to help him to rehab and get better, whether that's diet, whether that's exercises, whether it's operations, whether it's needles, whatever it is, he's prepared to do whatever it takes to help him to get back. He's just really quite a remarkably resilient young man. I don't know how he does it. You've got to be incredibly mentally tough to go through an injury that's hampered him for as long as that, and it happened to him when he was number one in the world. He was playing the best tennis of his life. He was on the most incredible winning streak, and then semi-finals of the French, it starts, he has a problem with his hip, and that was 2017, kind of end of May 2017, beginning of June, and it's been a challenge for him ever since. But so he's still on the mend, and hoping to get going again at the beginning of the year.
I've just got to come in at this point, Judy, right, and I hope you don't mind, but years ago when Andy was signed with Fred Perry, right, I was a big Andy fan, obviously, and remember he wore the white top and the blue Fred Perry?
Yeah.
So I was all kitted out as a wee boy, white top, white shorts, and I remember ordering it from the website, and not only has he obviously get the normal signature, but he signed it himself, and I've kept that since I was a wee lad.
Oh, I love it. Proper fan.
And I said to my mum last night, I says, I'm going to tell Judy that because she'll love it.
That's lovely. Yeah, I remember those cards. They were great. And the Fred Perry kit was cool. Yeah. It was quite cool and grungy for, when he was young, it kind of fitted for him. Love it.
Katie, sorry, back to you.
So what advice would you give to the youth of today? On what? Like just everything, really, like
in general.
life, yeah, in general.
I think it's a tough one to answer because there's so many different. It depends what people are doing, but I think that, you know, if you've worked out what it is that you want to do with your life, you know, what occupation or study or sport or whatever it is that you want to pursue, is probably to find somebody who is already excellent at what they do and try and find a way to work alongside them or to get them to mentor you in some way. There's absolutely no substitute for being around somebody who knows what they're doing, who's got a calm head, a track record, and who has your best interests at heart, and who wants to help you as much as you want to be helped by them. And, you know, never to be afraid to ask for help. I mean, the worst thing that somebody can say is no, and I've learned how to deal with no for many, many years as a woman working in a male-dominated industry. And I always think, you know, you've got to develop a thick skin, and you've got to not be afraid to go back and ask again, or to make a nuisance of yourself, and, you know, and keep asking. But I think that's, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you can find somebody to give you some work experience, or to be, you know, or to be a mentor to you, that's, and work, you know, believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, no, you can't expect somebody else to. And be prepared to work as hard as you have to, because nobody gets to the top in anything. If you're trying to get to the top of something, nobody gets there without hard work. You know, talent will get you so far. You need people to open doors for you, to create the opportunities, and then you need to put the hard work in. And it's bringing a good attitude every day to what you do that will make you successful.
That includes higher PE, Katie, so just remember that, all right? The next couple of questions are about some of the initiatives and some of the programs that you've got set up at the moment. In 2017, you set up the Judy Murray Foundation. What was the reason behind that?
The reason behind that was that I was just getting increasingly frustrated that Scotland wasn't capitalising on Jamie and Andy's success, or the opportunities that success presented. And I've always been a bit pissed off with tennis having this elitist tag, you know, that it's only for people who have money, or for the middle class. And so I wanted to do something that took tennis into places where it didn't exist, because I recognise there's fans all over Scotland that are loving tennis because there are Scots to support in the biggest events. And I wanted to take tennis into places where you wouldn't normally find it. And my common sense was telling me that if I go in and I deliver lots of activities just to children and young people, that will be very short-termist. What I need to do is build a workforce. So I need to build a workforce. Can you still hear me?
I'll hear you, but not see you.
All right, okay. I think my battery was going a little bit. Yeah, so my common sense was telling me that if I build a workforce and I teach more people how to teach starter tennis in whatever space they have available, so whether that's a school playground or a community hall, then if there are more deliverers, that creates more opportunities for people to play. So that's why I started the foundation, and that's what I do. I go around the country teaching people how to teach tennis.
Excellent. Katie?
So you're a key promoter for women and girls in sport. Like, how will we really know when we have achieved equality in sport, and what will that look like, do you think?
I think it will still take a long time to get there, Katie. I think we were on our way. We were in the best position that we had been in up to the end of 2019 in terms of, you know, visibility and momentum, I think, behind different women's sports. And I think, you know, in an Olympic year, there's always big visibility on female athletes. Tennis always has big visibility around Wimbledon, because it's the biggest prize in tennis and the men and women play at the same venue. But there are very few sports that can say that like athletics and tennis, that you have equality at the top in terms of visibility, prize money, perhaps. But I think that the successes of the national teams, if you look at Scotland's women's football team qualifying for the World Cup, the excitement, the visibility around that is massive for encouraging more women and girls not just to watch sport but to actually get involved in playing it. And if you look at England, who are always a long way ahead of us because they started taking it seriously before we did, and we're catching up here. You know, if you look at their rugby, cricket, netball, football, and hockey teams, they are world class. So people want to watch them. And when the performance is world class, it becomes more watchable. It puts bums on seats. It puts eyes on screens. And then when more people can see it because it is on TV or in other forms of the media, if you can see it, you might just one day believe that you could be it. But you certainly might want to have a go at it if you can see it. But if you can't see it, you're unlikely to be it. So I think we were as close, we were in the best position that we could have, that we've ever been in towards the end of 2019, and COVID has really sent us a giant leap backwards. So, but I think we have to try and see the opportunity here, because as a result of COVID, there will be a lot of challenges for everybody with their physical and mental health. And I think that's where sport and physical activity for women and men, it's going to play a huge role going forward. So I think that if we really get behind equality of opportunity at grassroots, then we can start to pick up that momentum again. But it is about visibility. It is about brands and companies and sponsors getting behind women's sport in the same way as they get behind men's sport. And market forces are such that the men are miles ahead of us just now in terms of all of that. But we have to keep our foot on the gas and keep heading forward.
Superb. Judy, I'm conscious of your time, and we've got our Christmas jumpers on, so we'll move on to the last couple of questions in relation to Christmas. And I've got the first one. We've named it Christmas at the Murrays, so we'd like to know what your best and your worst Christmas present is that you've received.
I think somebody asked me that the other day, and you know, when I think of best Christmas presents, I can't get past Spirograph, and I don't know if you guys will remember that. It was a drawing game with lots of little discs, and it made just great kind of shapes and things. And I remember getting that. I really wanted it, you know, in the days when you had your list made for months and you had to wait to get a special present. I mean, nowadays it feels like kids get special presents all the time. Yeah. But I remember waiting for Spirograph, and that I just played with that and played with that and played with that. So I think that stands out as a best present from many, many years ago. And the worst presents for me are just anything that is socks. I mean, who gives people socks for Christmas? But somebody always does. So yeah, socks. I mean, I remember always you'd open up something from a granny or an auntie and you'd think, socks, what are you doing? It's Christmas, you know? Anyway, socks, yeah.
Yeah, you'll get the next question, pal.
What's your favourite Christmas movie or song?
Christmas movie is definitely Miracle on 34th Street, although I'm a big fan of Home Alone as well. But I can't watch Home Alone every year, but I can watch Miracle on 34th Street with Richard Attenborough. It's just a lovely, nice, quite romantic and a little bit sad in some bits. But he's just the most amazing Father Christmas. And I think song is probably I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day by Wizard, because it reminds me of my student days and dancing around the kitchen in my student flat with all my flatmates and just going a bit nuts. I don't do things like that anymore because I'm far too old, but I that's always what that song makes me think of, a time and a place when that was just great fun.
Judy, my next question is a bit of a strange one, but we've got Mr. McHugh to thank for this one, but have you got a favourite Christmas cracker joke?
Yeah, actually I have. What do you call a donkey with 3 legs?
I don't know.
Wonky.
That's right.
It's dreadful, isn't it? But it's about the one joke that I always remember, and it came out of a cracker.
Katie.
Do you have any family traditions that take place at Christmas?
Well, I would have to say that certainly with Andy and Jamie, because they are professional tennis players, they are rarely at home over Christmas, because the tournaments at the start of the year are always in Australia or on the other side of the world. So for them to get ready for that, they're often spending Christmas in warmer climates and outdoors so they can prepare for that. So but if I was picking a family tradition, there are two games that we would always play, and one was Dominoes and the other one was carpet bowls. And Scattergrays, that was if you're looking at a board game. So yeah, I think those would be our definite go-to after you've been fed and everybody's had a little bit of a tidy up and a little bit of a sleep. It would be something competitive, and those would be the main three things that would be out every year.
I can imagine that's a very intense game of dominoes, Judy. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, it is. There's one member of my family who is ultra competitive, and no prizes for guessing who that is, and who also takes a long time deciding which domino he's going to play, because he's working everything out in his head. He's like some kind of chess computer as to what's going on, and also is a very bad loser.
Is Christmas now extra special when you've got grandkids on the scene?
Yeah, Andy and Kim and the kids were up for Christmas last year. Won't see them this year because of all the travel bans and everything, but that was very special. I mean, Christmas is always, it's just that bit extra special, isn't it, when there's children around? So it's far more chaotic, but yeah, great fun.
Absolutely. And then the last one is, what will your plans be for Christmas this year?
I'm going to stay up here in Scotland. I think the boys will both be in London. I think it's just we've all kind of been waiting to see what all the restrictions are. Yeah. There's different restrictions down there for them where they are, and obviously different up here. But I actually think that with everything that we've gone through this year, I think it just makes more sense to kind of stay close to home, don't take any unnecessary risks anywhere, and let's hope for a healthier, happier, safer, sportier 2021, and looking forward to seeing this vaccine sometime in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, I will second that. The final question, always have a wee finish up. We've named it dinner guests, but we'd like to know your 3 Christmas party guests. It could be anybody, but why? Why them?
I would have Prince Philip. I always say Prince Philip because I think that if you get a few red wines down Prince Philip, I think you're going to get an awful lot of great royal secret stories. George Clooney, for obvious reasons, he doesn't actually need to speak at all. I just sit and look at him. And I think probably somebody like Joanna Lumley. I'm a big fan of Joanna Lumley. Really fun person to be around. I've met her a couple of times. I've done a couple of charity things with her, and she's riotous. So I think those would be my 3.
Love it, absolutely love it. Judy, that is all our questions for you. I honestly can't thank you enough. We've been able to spend the last kind of half an hour, 40 minutes with you. We really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much, so much.
That is okay. You're very, very welcome. I'm always up for supporting sporty people and young people, and I think that the more that we can share experiences, the better. You did a good job with finding a way to me through the foundation, and your email probably came in at a time where I thought, yeah, I could do that. So there you go. Yeah, very happy to be with you. Nice to meet you, everybody. Katie, well done with the questions and the smile. And have a great 2021. Well, let's just hope it's better than 2020.
Absolutely. Mr. Johnson, thank you for your time. Katie, thank you for your time. I wish you all a merry, safe and holy Christmas. Take care. Goodbye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you had to get Holy in there at the